Is there something valuable to get out of postmodernism?
My answer there will be a cautious yes. So if you scale up and take a pro-reason attitude, part of a pro-reason attitude is going to be often evidence is complicated. Often our understanding of our cognitive capacities is very complicated, and that we are still in the early stages of doing science, but also early stages of doing psychology and learning about our own cognitive capacities. So if you're a pro-reason person, part of the ethos is to say, I will take in the evidence. I will do my best job to put it together logically and to put forth then a hypothesis. But then what I also should do as an individual is be able to step outside of my own hypothesis and critique it and ask myself, have I taken into account all of the evidence? Or am I not paying attention to certain things that came across as uncomfortable? Have I logically integrated everything and being willing to criticize my logic? So one of the commitments to reason then is to say, I am also then open socially to putting my ideas out there and having other smart people do that critical exercise. So mature cognizers individually will do that. And then as part of the project, socially, we will start to set up institutions to formalize that. Institutions like universities, where we get smart people together and we want them to discuss and to debate, but then also to teach the next generation of students how to do all of that sort of stuff. So there's that pro-reason epistemology then becomes a working part of your individual psychology, but we also institutionalize it socially. So postmoderns, and I'm using that now as a short form for people who are very skeptical, very cynical, very focused on the negative, would then, from the Enlightenment modernist perspective, be useful along the way. So what we would do is then say, okay, so you are Jacques Derrida, you have this critique of our latest theories of grammar. That's very interesting, and you're a very clever guy, Derrida, which he was. So we take that into account, and that means that we need to rethink our understanding of grammar and our broader theory of linguistics and how that fits with concept formation and so on, because you've shown that there is this weakness, right? And that's fine. So in that sense, the postmoderns would be instrumentally useful to pro-Enlightenment, pro-genuine cognition thinkers. Now, where they are less welcome is that we know that the postmoderns are coming in not seeing themselves as instrumental in this Enlightenment scientific cognition project, but they are coming in as adversaries of it. So from our perspective, they are instrumental. They'll find our weaknesses, and then we will fix those weaknesses. But really, we know that we are dealing with people who want to deny or destroy that project in the first place. So it's a double-edged sword.
But what's the source of that adversarial relationship towards reason?
I think sometimes there are people who, when they are young and they're smart and they're open-minded and they're interested in the big ideas, that they will give all of the big ideas a good faith hearing, but they then just come to be convinced that the negative arguments have the better of it. And so they will then become skeptics just because they don't see an answer to the skepticism. But we do know that psychologically, many people come to their intellectual maturity already with baggage, that they're pre-committed to another religion, they're pre-committed to a certain philosophy. Maybe they have had terrible experiences in their life and they are already cynical and pessimistic. So in that case, we know one of the things that can happen is when people who have that psychology come to the big ideas, what they will be finding is they will gravitate toward the big ideas that confirm their pre-existing negative psychology. And in many cases, what they're not so much looking for is a philosophy that will teach them the truth about the world, but a philosophy that will affirm their already psychological disposition toward the world. Uh, so that's one view. And I think another view, though, I think also is just a kind of laziness. It's not necessarily that you have a dark psychology, but if you think of pro-reason and the Enlightenment world, in some ways, those are very challenging. Right? So the pro-reason position says, you really have to be good at logic and math and defining your terms carefully, and be willing to change your mind frequently as new evidence comes in. And you're going to have to be very tolerant of other ways of looking at the world, and maybe even spend some time putting yourself in other people's cognitive shoes or cognitive framework and trying to look at the world. So it requires a lot of energy, a lot of activity, and a lot of skill development. And just as we know, a lot of people physically aren't very into health and fitness and nutrition. They're physically lazy. The same thing holds, I think, on the cognitive side. They're just going to look at the Enlightenment reasons. That's just way too much work. I don't want to do that. I want to just believe whatever I'm comfortable believing. So then, to the extent they're getting some university education, if you've got some philosophical arguments that tell them, well, doing all of that work is pointless because reason doesn't work in the end, right? Or everybody is just subjectively committed to whatever emotionally they feel like anyway. So I might as well just do that anyway. So then they are going to again be attracted to non-enlightenment or anti-enlightenment arguments. What typically happens is people who have very passionate political commitments when they are young, even if they are aware that they have a terrible track record, even if they are aware that they don't have good arguments, they will be looking for a way to double down on their commitments. So any postmodern arguments cognitively that come along and say everything is just a subjective commitment, everybody just reinterprets the evidence according to their paradigms or their felt value commitments anyway. The apparent arguments for liberalism and capitalism are just a meta narrative, and we can set aside all meta narratives, or they are a cynical power play. And so we should just be jaded with respect to them. So any of those arguments will sound like, oh, okay. So that enables me to stick with my value commitments. The analogy I always think of at this point is this is to talk about politics, but we have a longer history of religion. So the same thing, people when they are young and they are passionate and they have a certain view of the world and they adopt a religion and it comes to form their identity. And they think my religion describes what the world is to be beautiful and noble and just and my hopes for mankind and so on. But then I'm a moderately sophisticated intellectual person, and I get to the point where I realize that the arguments for my religion are quite weak. It seems like the arguments for the various non-religious approaches are very strong. And maybe even I'm aware that my religion has a terrible historical track record of violent and destruction of other people who disagree with me. But still, I want to believe my religion is true. And we do know this is well-worked philosophical and psychological territory by people who have decided in their heart of hearts that they're going to believe their religion no matter what, will find very clever ways of setting aside the evidence, of reinterpreting the history, of latching onto the skeptical arguments and saying that everything is just subjective, that logic is weak, and so on. So I think part of it then about the attraction of postmodern is if you have political commitments that you want to maintain for subjective reasons, the postmodern cognitive arguments that let you set aside objectivity and reason will be seductive, and many people let themselves be seduced by.
Thank you for listening or watching. If you want to stay updated on future episodes, you can follow the show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Please also consider leaving a like on YouTube or a 5-star review on Spotify, as this helps the show reach a lot of people. You can also leave comments if you have any personal thoughts on the topics discussed during the episode. More conversations and solo episodes are on the way in the following weeks, and following the show is the best way to be notified about them. If you would like to reach out to me directly, you can DM me at philosophy.everyday on Instagram. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.